What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is your boy Frankie Bones, and in today's video, got a pretty special one for you guys. We're going to be giving our preview for the CDL Championship, which will be next weekend in Las Vegas. Super excited for this event. There's a lot of teams that are playing really well and sort of peaking at the right time. Unfortunately, it wasn't OpTic in Major 5, but we'll talk about them a little bit later in the video. Going to start off with a couple of notes of things heading into Champs. Then we're going to be breaking down our 8 remaining teams and sort of how they've looked throughout the season. And then finally, we are going to be going through and filling out our Champs bracket. Before we get too far into the video, if you guys enjoy this video, make sure to drop a like. And as well, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe to not miss out on more Call of Duty content coming in the future. So the first thing that we'll do, we'll talk about some of the biggest notes heading into Champs weekend. Definitely the biggest thing of note is that the Boston Breach are making a roster change. A lot of people sort of thought that rosters had locked up to this point, especially to the point where it's only people that you would have had signed on your team. Apparently not the case. Boston Breach is bringing in Snoopy for Vivid. Now, anybody who's not familiar with Snoopy, he recently joined the Boston Academy team, was recruited by GM Doug, and played pretty well for them. I think they got top 3 or top 4 at the Toronto Major on the Challenger side, but pretty interesting move. He has a lot of slang. He has a lot of really good movement as an SMG, but a lot of people are just sort of questioning the comms, and ultimately the comms just aren't great on this team. There's not really just like an in-game leader, which I think is what they tried to fix by bringing in Reese Vivid back in for Nero, but who knows? This team has a ton of slang, so if they're able to put it together, hypothetically they could make a run, but I don't think a lot of people have super high expectations for this roster. The second thing of note is, will OpTic Texas be able to capitalize with the quote-unquote better side of the bracket? So looking at the bracket, they have a matchup with the Boston Breach off the bat. Not sure exactly what's going to happen there in terms of what that Boston team will look like. And on the other side of the bracket, having Atlanta FaZe, Toronto, LAT, it just sort of seems like it's sort of favored for OpTic in a way to be able to make a run. Obviously, this was the case at Major 5. They went 5-0 in the qualifiers and had a pretty good runway to be able to make it to winners finals at least. They end up going 0-6 map count. They end up dropping 3 maps, both to Florida and LAT. Obviously a tough first round losers matchup with LAT, but teams gonna have to rebound. I think they've been a little bit sick, as people have been talking about on Twitter, but obviously no excuses. This is the biggest tournament of the year, so got to show up and be ready. Hopefully the boys are practicing well. The next thing we'll talk about is the Atlanta FaZe. Have they sort of peaked at the right time? Have they achieved their final form? And I talk about this because they looked really, really good in the respawns, in particular in Hardpoint. They've been a good control team throughout the year, which we'll talk about here momentarily, but the Hardpoints have been really, really good throughout Major 5 and helped propel them in Major 5 tournament to the grand final, and just sort of very off script, losing 3 S&Ds to New York, really their staple game mode. They won the respawns. It was really just an odd series, but they've just looked really well, and it looks like Atlanta FaZe maybe finally put it all together. Obviously, they won an event earlier this year, but they might be peaking at a really good time here to be able to make a run at Champs. And the last thing that we'll talk about is who's going to be able to knock off the big dogs. A lot of teams are playing really well right now. New York has really hit stride. Toronto has rebounded. OpTic on a little bit of a slide, but again, still looked really good over the last couple of months. LAT looked better and bounced back. And obviously Atlanta FaZe playing really well, but you never know. Seattle's a team that really struggled coming into Champs. They might be able to make a run. Obviously they have Pred and Sib, so if they're able to have a really great performance, could they make a run? Could a team like Minnesota make a good push? Obviously, they placed well in Major 5 with Dylan Attach back in the roster. He's coming for his slice of the pie. So the big question is, who's going to be able to make that run? Who's that dark horse team that will be able to make it deep into champs? Next thing we'll do, like I talked about, we'll go through and talk about a couple of different notes on each team. These are season-long stats, and I'll pick out a few things that I think are important. Going to try and keep these short and sweet as we talk about them again as we go through the bracket. So the first team we'll start off with, obviously the number 1 seed, Atlanta FaZe. They've been pretty consistent all year. To talk about their overall map record, 58% win percentage, series percentage at 66%. And again, they made a really strong push in Major 5, ultimately dropping to New York in the grand final. So here I have the stats broken down, hardpoint, S&D, and control. S&D, again, like I've talked about, has really paved the way for this team. Their best map, Embassy, we have known this for a long time. They've been a great team on Embassy, as well as El Asilo. The Embassy percentage was just a little bit better, so that's why that I put that on the graphic. But those are definitely their two best S&D maps. Obviously, they have a great map pool in terms of S&D overall, but Fortress is really a map they always look to avoid, again, with the most vetoes at 38 times. They picked Asilo the most, which I thought was pretty interesting. So something to look forward to, but their hardpoint just over 50%. They've been a lot more consistent and a lot better over the last couple of weeks. Again, Embassy, a really good map for them. And just pretty interesting to see moving forward. I don't really think there's a ton of Hydro teams, honestly, in the game at this moment. So Veto, pretty interesting there. Again, good on Hotel. But in the control, again, graded Asilo. They love the map, so interesting to see what maps they'll sort of go with here as we move on in the tournament. The next team that we're going to talk about is the number 2 seed, and that is our very own OpTic Texas. So again, they had a little bit of a blunder in Major 5, getting double rounded without taking a single map, but overall the numbers sort of speak for themselves for this team after some of the changes that they've made. So some of these you have to take with a little bit of perspective as well. Obviously a very great hardpoint team with a 65% win percentage. Really good on Hotel. They have a really great map set in hardpoint overall. 15-4 record there, just under 80%. Embassy is a map they've been vetoing all year, obviously done so 24 times, so it makes sense that this is sort of their worst map. Fortress they've picked the most in terms of hardpoints. They've done so 11 times. Florida was able to beat them on this map, so interested to see if they're able to get back into the lab and sort of fix some of the issues that they had going on there. But a surprisingly good S&D team as well, just a hair under 60%. They've been a good Hotel team. Asilo is a little bit difficult for them. They've been pretty decent on Expo, but they have had some good maps on Asilo as well. Obviously, one of those to the Minnesota Rokkr when they forfeited with the SAE at the beginning of the year. So it should be actually 50%, but it is the map they vetoed the most. So should be interesting. I just talked about the Minnesota thing. I saying control, baby. But talking about their control, under 50%, something that they're really hopefully working on heading into champs. It's a big swing mode to help get you there. And obviously having 2 in the grand final puts you in a difficult spot in terms of your map pool. Moving on to the number 3 seed, we have the New York Subliners. So this is a team that's really caught fire over the last 2 majors. And the numbers sort of speak for themselves as a top team, just under 60% map count, just under 65% series count, and obviously the first place finish in Major 5. And across the board, they're just about 60% in all 3 game modes, which is really good to see, especially coming around the time of champs. Their best mode is hardpoint, just over 60%. A good Embassy team, 10-4. Fortress, not so much there, at a 5-8 record, just under 40% win percentage. And they picked Hotel a lot, which I thought was interesting. I think they were just under 500 on this map, but obviously a lot of the top teams do like to play this map, and most vetoes on Embassy. But overall, again, just talking about some of their stats, just under 60% on a couple of the other maps as well. So, mentioned to see where Paco can really carry this team. If we get 99 kills and some of the other guys around him step up and are consistent, this team could really make another run, just like they did in Major 5. Moving on to the number 4 seed, we'll talk about the Toronto Ultra. And again, just another really high-quality team. A lot of these teams are up at the top. Obviously, OpTic Texas numbers are a little bit weird, but you guys can pause and take a look at all these numbers as well if you guys want, trying to keep these a little short and sweet. Overall, again, just right about that magic 60% number, 59% overall, 61.4 in the series, and they ended up taking home a 4th place finish in their home major. But the thing that I want to highlight for this Toronto Ultra team, by far the best control team in the game, almost winning 75% of their controls is absolutely insane and is really a good way to help you win series. Obviously, you're down 0-2. That is a great Kickstarter for you, but a lot of times going to be 1-1 heading into that map 3 and puts them up 2-1, puts them up in a great advantage. They've absolutely dominated hotel control. You know, at over an 80% win percentage is absolutely unreal. They don't have a control map worse than 50%. Also good on a CeeLo as well. But we've seen how good this team can be on hotel control. We saw that absolute bang out with OpTic Texas in the Major 5 qualifiers. It really just shows how good of a team that they are on hotel overall. They do like playing hotel hardpoint as well. But talking about hardpoint, Mercado, very good. Embassy, kind of an iffy map for them. Some of the vetoes, I just put RIP BPGG because all these stats are from Breaking Point. And some of the vetoes and stuff were a little bit mixed up with not having all the vetoes on there just for the Toronto Ultra. So a little bit weird, but you guys can maybe go check them out. Maybe they'll be updated by the time that Champs ends up coming out. But again, another really strong team in Toronto. The next team we'll talk about is the number 5 seed. That's the Los Angeles Thieves. And again, another top team right about 60% with all their numbers. S&D a little bit weaker, but taking home a 5th and 6th place finish from Major 5. You know, obviously a tough draw. They had a really tough qualifier for them. Just a little bit out of form, but still beat some good teams along the way, including OpTic Texas in an impressive 3-0. With this team, we're going to talk about the control, as well as a great hardpoint team. We'll start with control, almost 63% win percentage overall in control. Another great hotel team, just about 70% win percentage. Expo, only 7 times, so right about 50-50. They have vetoed a CeeLo a fair amount of times, as a lot of teams have in the league, but just really strong on hotel. They're able to fix one of those maps that they get a little more comfortable on. Obviously, it could be a really dangerous team, especially moving on, looking at something like a grand final. But this team has been really good in hardpoint overall as well, just a hair under 60%. Really good hydro team, so this is one of those teams that does actually like hydro a lot. Another interesting note, their worst map based on percentage, hotel. Just under 50%. And it is their most picked map, so pretty interesting there. Fortress veto, sort of is what it is with a lot of these teams, but if this team is able to round out into shape, Kenny's playing well, sky's the limit for this squad. Moving on to our next team, the number 6 seed, the Minnesota Rokkr, and pretty interesting to see them up at 6 because they had been battling in that 8 seed with Vegas. They have a really strong Major 5, and they end up placing 3rd, making a good run with Dylan attached. The team seems to be clicking with fame on that SMG, but the numbers overall just sort of pretty underwhelming, I would say, overall for the whole season. But again, take it with a grain of salt. Their control is their best game mode, just over 57%. On Expo, they're 6-1. They do like a CeeLo a lot as well. Not the best hotel team. As you can see, they vetoed it 31 times, but you sort of never know with a newer sort of shaped team. They played again really well in Major 5, so you want to sort of look at more of their more recent performances sort of compared to their season overall, but just wanted to obviously put this together for, just talking points and just to sort of compare the body of work for these teams overall, as a lot of the top teams have stuck for the most part throughout the season. The next team that we're going to talk about is the Boston Breach, another team where the numbers aren't necessarily going to tell the story about where this team is and sort of what their recent form has looked like. And just sort of looking at their numbers again, just about a 50-50 team in most of the modes. They end up going out and getting rounded in Major 5, but we'll talk a little bit about this team in control. They've been a very strong control team throughout the year. Zenny was a great control player. Bringing in Kremp, he has been phenomenal in control. And honestly, it's kind of like a TDM mode, which makes sense for a team that has such high slaying prowess with the players they have. Just under 66% win percentage in control. They are probably the best Asilo control team in the game. Just over 71% win percentage there. Their worst is Hotel at 57%, which is crazy. It's also their most vetoed. A lot of this has to do with a majority of the best control teams in the game are very good at Hotel. So this makes sense with wanting to get that out. And initially being fine with either Fortress or Asilo. Obviously, Asilo is their better map. And now Expo as well. So it'll be interesting to see sort of what lines up for the Boston Breach. They will have OpTic Texas. And OpTic will have the veto advantage. I assume they're going to get out Asilo. So it'll sort of be how they stack up in the other few modes. But both at 47%. Just going to have to see what this team can bring with Snoopy. And finally, we'll talk about our 8th seed. This is the Seattle Surge, led by Pred. The Thunder down under. Again, the numbers overall pretty underwhelming for this team. Been really poor in S&D. They end up getting rounded. I believe that they started in losers. They end up losing that first matchup. But overall, really strong hardpoint team again with the slaying. Letting Pred loose. Their best maps on Fortress, just under 65%. Hotel of 50-50. I believe they had another map that was 7-7. I kind of forget I picked Hotel because it had more maps overall for them. Most picked is Fortress. Obviously makes sense being their best, and their most vetoed is Mercado. They've been riding with that sort of auto veto mentality throughout most of the season, so it'll be interesting to see if that ends up making it into the map pool, if they've been making any adjustments there in terms of trying to strengthen that map pool and diversify the matches a little bit more against some of the better teams. We'll talk quickly about their S&D. It's been pretty bad. Been under, a 33% win percentage, which is really just awful. And their best map is under 50%, which is crazy. Mercado, they're 0-5. Their most picked is Asilo, which again up there with their best map. And their most vetoed is Mercado. They really just dislike Mercado overall. It's a pretty interesting map. Obviously, it's a pretty AR-heavy map, and just not really sure what the mentality is there. Hopefully, they've been working on some stuff because an auto veto is never good as you head into champs. So now what we're going to do, we're going to send it over to myself again with the bracket. We're going to be breaking things down, and I will show you guys who I think will win champs in 2023. Alright guys, so over here at the bracket, we are going to go through all of our picks for champs and ultimately crown our winner. So our first matchup to kick off the weekend is going to be the New York Subliners taking on the Minnesota Rokkr. Have this written down in front of me, so if you guys hear anything, sort of already went through this, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to end up giving this one to the New York Subliners in a 3-2. Their form has looked really good. I like the move that Minnesota made to bring back Attach, but just don't think that it's going to be enough for them in this matchup. For our second match, we have the Atlanta FaZe taking on the Seattle Surge. And I'm going to give one map to the Surge, but I really think that Atlanta FaZe aren't going to have too much trouble with this roster. You could even drop map 1 and take the next 3. They've just looked really strong, and they just don't really have a weak game mode anymore. When we talked about them sort of peaking at the right time, so I have Atlanta FaZe moving on. For our third matchup of the day on Thursday, we obviously have OpTic Texas moving on. I'm going to give Boston Breach a map. I think they might be able to take the control, but I think a little too chaotic in the hard points for them. Maybe not enough practice for the S&Ds, but I think that OpTic has worked on their game. Hopefully, again, getting healthy over the next week and a half. Recording this here on Wednesday. This video is going to be out Thursday, so plenty of time to recover, sort of get their legs under them, get some good practice in, and refocus heading to Las Vegas. And finally, to wrap up our day on Thursday, our final Winners Round 1 matchup, we have the Toronto Ultra taking on the Los Angeles Thieves. And I'm going to give this one to Toronto. I'm going to give this one to them in a 3-2. Toronto's sort of an off and on team to me. These are two teams that both like to play hotel. So it'll be pretty interesting to see if Toronto ends up taking out hotel control. I really don't think they will, but should be pretty interesting, honestly. I think this is going to be a really good matchup to wrap up our Thursday, and is going to kick us off into a great weekend of matches. Now scrolling down to the losers round 1, our first matchup on Friday is going to be the Seattle Surge taking on LAT. And I'm going to give this one to LAT in a 3-0. I think that Seattle's just kind of chalked. They gave it all in that first series. This team is destined to break up. I kind of just think that it makes sense here for them to get the 3-0. LAT is going to be focused and poised to make a run. Obviously a great team around them, so I think they get this one done in a 3-0. Wrapping up our losers round 1 matchups, the next match we have is Boston Breach taking on the Rokkr. I'm going to give this one to the Rokkr. I kind of just think that it'll be a close series. I think Boston is really going to fight for it, but just don't rate too highly the move that Boston made. Doesn't make a lot of sense. They made too many roster changes recently, and just can't really see how it's going to go too well. They have fight in them, taking 2 maps, but I'll give it to the Rokkr. Scrolling on back up to our winners round 2 matchups. Our first matchup that we have in this side of the bracket is going to be Atlanta FaZe taking on the Toronto Ultra. And in this case, I'm going to give this one to the FaZe by way of 3-2. Again, this team has looked really good. 2 pretty even teams in my opinion. Both teams don't really have a weak game mode, but I just think the S&D prowess is going to be a lot for this Atlanta FaZe team. Can have plenty of strats, plenty of slasher, search coming in this tournament. And if it comes down to a map 5, really have to go with Atlanta FaZe getting the edge there. And finally, to wrap up our Friday, we have OpTic Texas taking on the New York Subliners. I'm going to give this one as well to OpTic in a Game 5. Their S&Ds looked pretty good recently. I wouldn't say one of the best teams in S&D, but again, I think a lot of things come out at Champs. I think some strategies, some maps that people have been hiding, and I think OpTic Texas are able to get it done here in a map 5. So we will now kick off our weekend, a really long day on Saturday, wrapping up all of our matches up until the grand finals. Kicking things off on Saturday, our first match is the New York Subliners taking on Los Angeles Thieves. I'm going to give this one to the Thieves in a 3-1. Although New York looked really impressive throughout Major 5, I just think that LAT is a really veteran team. They're going to be able to lock in. I think that they're just going to be able to get it done. I just sort of have a feeling that they're going to be able to make a run here at Champs, and they're hungry to get another win. New York sort of not sure what's going to happen after the Major 5 win, and just like LAT here. Moving on to our last losers round 2 matchup, we have the Toronto Ultra taking on the Minnesota Rokkr rather. And in this one, it's going to be the Ultra for me, and it's going to be the Ultra in a 3-0. I just think that they're, again, another team that's going to lock in after that winners round 2 loss, and I think they're just going to strap in and be ready to play on Saturday. Great team. I think that Scrappy's going to have a great major, and I just think that the Rokkr just really don't have enough outside of the changes they made that I like. I just think they're just not going to have enough in this matchup. Moving back up to the top, we have our winners final as our next match between OpTic and the Atlanta FaZe. And obviously you guys probably know where I'm going here. I'm going to give this one to OpTic in a 3-1. I think FaZe are going to be able to take one of the maps, but it should be interesting actually with the vetoes, especially because Atlanta FaZe will have the veto advantage being the higher seed, but I like OpTic in a 3-1 here. I think that they're going to be buckled in. They know they need to perform, and I just believe. I believe that they're going to be able to get it done and move on to the grand final. Moving back down the bracket, we will have our losers round 3 matchup between the Los Angeles Thieves and Toronto Ultra. And in this one, I'm going to give this one actually to LAT in a 3-2. So we scroll up here. These teams actually played in winners round 1. And it's going to be another game 5. I just think these teams are pretty well aligned. Both two great hotel teams. I think that the team's play style and their map choices are pretty similar. And I think that LAT is going to be able to get it done again. It's hard to beat a team in 2 best-of-5s, in a game 5 in S&D. They're going to have played 4 S&Ds at this point. I think that LAT is going to find a way to make it happen. But I think it's going to be another great series for the people as well. And to wrap up our Saturday slate, we have the Atlanta FaZe taking on the Los Angeles Thieves, and really want to see this happen. I'm going to give this one to the Atlanta FaZe in a game 5. The people want to see OpTic Texas and the Atlanta FaZe in a grand final at Champs. That would be absolutely incredible. I just think the FaZe are a little bit a step above the Los Angeles Thieves. I think that they don't have a lockdown mode like FaZe does, which is why I lean to them in the game 5. And I think, again, this one's just going to be another battle. We're going to have a ton of really good matchups, I think, during Champs, and it's going to be a great weekend of Call of Duty. And finally, we will move on to our grand final between OpTic Texas and the Atlanta FaZe. And obviously, there was never a doubt. Once again, Frankie Bones is going to predict OpTic Texas to take the win. They're finally going to be able to do it. Maybe I'm jinxing them. Probably not. Probably just Scumpy on the watch parties. But I think they get it done in a 5-3. Yes, they just played each other here. In a best-of-5, grand finals is a best-of-9. I think that some of OpTic's map pools are a little bit deeper outside of S&D. I think Control just about even. I think S&D, obviously give that one to FaZe. Hard points will be pretty similar. Obviously, Atlanta FaZe has come on really strong over the last couple of weeks in terms of their performances in the hard point, but just going to have to pull for OpTic. This roster, I think, knows that they have to perform here at Champs if they want to stick. Obviously, there's a lot of pressures from the outside, a lot of great free agents that are going to be available during this roster mania period, and I think they're going to hear that noise, and they're going to show up, and they're going to perform, and they're going to be hoisting it once again with Hector and Scumpy by their side. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Let me know down in the comment section below what you think of my predictions, what you guys thought of some of the analyses of the teams, and ultimately who you have winning Champs. But for now, that's going to do it for me, guys. This has been your boy Frankie Bones, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Peace out.